one of the things that actually I remember you mentioning, this idea that like when you're also doing the healing, there is the potential for this exchange of information as well that can occur. Like if you're healing a particular wound and suddenly you'll get information about that wound that the person hadn't told you about.
Yep. I would say that that isn't a Reiki effect, but I would say that, well, my personal take on that is that we all have different faculties. I mean, I can see, I can touch, I can smell, but we also have different skills or faculties related to our consciousness that you don't really get taught to you in elementary school. It's not part of the curriculum kind of thing. And I just find that when people are exposed more to energetic experiences, or they are practicing an energetic modality, they become more aware of what their own talent or skills or intuitions might be, whatever word you want to use. Other languages have a lot more words for this than English does. My particular thing or faculty seems to be that, first of all, I'm a very visual person as it is. I learn visually better than I do auditorily, for instance. But I also get my ideas in the form of pictures or ideas in my mind anyway. And when I'm doing Reiki, I find that I get a stream of images or information, not automatically and not all the time, and not only with some people and not others. Just when it comes, and often it's related to some aspect of the person. So how did I get that information? I don't know. It's one of those, well, how do we get information into our eyes? I mean, or our ears, there's a way that our system is taking in that information. Visual and auditory stimuli are creating electrical impulses in our brains, and they're getting uncoded and recoded back in our brain, and it's, causing decisions in our brains to be made and so on. I don't see why it's not, it's perfectly reasonable, I think, that other kinds of senses are taking in other kinds of information at different frequencies and making our brains work and causing us to do stuff with that information.
So when you say in the way that there are obviously more senses than the five, other than Reiki, or with Reiki, what are good ways to explore finding out what your talent or whatever you would call it is, be it healing or clairvoyance, etc. What pathway do you think someone would take? You said taking Reiki, you can learn what your talent is.
I would never associate as a Reiki master. I wouldn't say. So, just for the sake of it, this is a bit of a roundabout answer to your actual question, but just to clarify the difference between what I said, which was my personal take, and what I mean from Reiki. So I teach Reiki in the most traditional form of it. There's lots of different things that call itself Reiki, and they have their own system and so on, but I teach Usui Shikiryoho. And so I belong to something called the International Reiki Alliance, which is a group of masters that has all agreed to teach in that form and transmit that information that's in our way of teaching in the way that we do it. So in that tradition, we do not teach anything other than Reiki, nor do we associate it with other senses, faculty. We don't use it as a method to get information. We don't use it as a method to do anything else other than do Reiki. So from a Reiki point of view, it doesn't. but I don't think the form of this is just about Reiki. So I'm mixing some of my own personal opinions about this other stuff into this conversation. So so your question was, how would you explore what your thing is, or your whatever? So for me, there's another source of information which you can regularly tap into, but this is my personal opinion, which is that we, and every religious tradition has some kind of way of expressing the same thing, which is that in you have a spark of the divine, and that spark comes from the divine. So your job, in my opinion, or one's job, in my opinion, on a spiritual basis, and by spiritual I mean the body of everything you were kind of getting at when you asked your question, is to figure out how to be able to feel that spark, because only your body's configured differently than your body and your body and your body. So too is your whole system. So there's something about that. You're configured in just a specific way. And just like Barney says, you were special just because you're you. But anyway, that being said, there must be something to that. That means that maybe you get information in a specific way. You're maybe open to certain things that others are not, and vice versa. So if that's true, then you probably have a very specific optimal state that's just subtly different than somebody else's, and it's all sort of coming back to the fact that you have your own spark of the divine. So I think one's job is to figure out what that feels like and be able to listen to it. It's not static, nor should one ever become attached to any objective that comes into your day-to-day awareness about what it's telling you, because to place your own judgment ahead of what is informed from the divine, it would be foolish. I mean, it's just a broader consciousness than yours. So if you try to follow that, and you just follow it day by day and step by step, that will guide you to what your particular gifts and talents are. Try it out. And it's a lot more experiential a process, and it's more of an integrated process. You're not always in your head then.
Should you maybe just give there would be a word of advice or something for a younger generation who's curious and open to the idea of learning more about ourselves and what we're capable of, such as energy healing or any other ability? I think you kind of already said that.
Well, I'm still on my own journey too. So to me, it's always fresh no matter what sort of age you're at. And I think that's part of it. I think it's possible to become attached to a path or to a set of structures or to a set of shoulds or whatever. And I don't think they have, if they're compatible, consistent, and whatever with this more divinely inspired path, fine. But that's just a coincidence. Anything social, in terms of structures or whatever, they exist to stabilize things, but they don't necessarily help you figure this out. I would say that being able to immerse yourself in that journey is the best thing you can do for yourself. And I would say that there are a lot of people that make seeking and searching an activity in and of itself, which does not necessarily serve the question that you asked. It can be distracting. It can be informative, and it could become what you do anyway. Maybe that is your one's path. But I would say that because of my own trials and how to integrate this into my life and so on, knowing that I am aware, I would say that being able to do something on a daily basis that is consistent and takes you further and deeper is something to try. It's not glamorous, right? And it doesn't give us necessarily an epiphany. There can even be a drudgery to it. But holding yourself to some sort of a practice really does take you further. If one does it on a sort of every couple of months basis, it's, as the years go on, it does not have the same return that doing something every day does. That's why in Reiki, for instance, the foundation of the practice is a daily self-treatment, because you're sort of in touch with that universal life energy, even for just a few minutes. So it's an important aspect of the practice.